Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. I'm going to prove to you in this video that Joe Biden was the absolute most pro-black president since Lyndon Johnson. Let me say it again. I'm going to prove to you with facts that Joe Biden was the most pro-black president since Lyndon Johnson. All right, I'm going to get into this because it just needs to be said. There's so much disinformation out there today that a lot of what I'm going to share with you, I doubt that you've even heard it. Because if you're tuning in to social media, if that's where you get your news, if that's where you get your information, or even main media, you're not going to be told all the awesome things that Joe Biden did for the African American community. I spent last year talking about this a lot. So I want to do it again, and I think this is the perfect time. Now, in the meantime, keep Joe Biden and his family in your prayers. He was recently diagnosed with prostate cancer, and reportedly it has metastasized in his bones. So keep him in your prayers. He's also dealing with allegations from books and others that he should have never ran for re-election, or he covered up where he was mentally and psychologically and so on. So they're dealing with a lot. So keep them in your prayers. Let me also say that I am not saying any of this because I am a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. I am not a Republican. I have not been a part of either political party in more than 25 years. So I am neither. I was a Democrat. I was a Republican. I have strong disagreements with both parties about different things. And as a man of faith, as a clergy member, it's just best for me to be nonpartisan and just stick with what I believe God's kingdom represents, not what these political parties represent. All right, so let's get into this. Why the facts show that Joe Biden is absolutely the most pro-black president, or was the most pro-black president since Lyndon Johnson. All right, let's go to another screen. So as you see, this says fact sheet. So I'm going to give you facts. I'm going to give you facts. And you, again, probably never heard of some of the facts that I'm going to share. But I'm going to give you facts. And facts are those pesky little truths that are true whether you believe them or not, basically. And in the court of public opinion, I know facts are not very important. As an attorney, I'm more accustomed to the court of law, where facts are everything. And we do a whole lot of stuff when we're in trial or hearings to share facts rather than rhetoric. But in the court of public opinion, it doesn't matter because people believe any and everything. They don't require facts. Well, I'm going to give you facts here. Here's a fact sheet about the Biden-Harris administration, okay? All right, let me just read this first paragraph, and then we're going to get specifically into what he did for the African-American community. 4 years ago, we stood in a winter of peril and a winter of possibilities. We were in the grip of the worst pandemic in a century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. But we came together as Americans and we braved through it. We emerged stronger and more prosperous and more secure. A little bit of the second paragraph. Today, we have the strongest economy in the world and have created a record 16.6 million new jobs. Wages are up, inflation continues to come down. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years. We're rebuilding our entire nation, urban, suburban, rural, and tribal communities. So that's a general description of where the country was when Biden left office, or just short of him leaving office. And you can verify every bit of that. When he took office in 2021, we were absolutely dealing with a terrible pandemic. People were dying like crazy, thousands by the day. A lot of those people, African-American men, especially, I mean, we're literally dying sometimes 10,000s per day. And that, of course, caused the economy to tank, that caused inflation to rise. It was just a really, really, really bad time. And Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden fixed every bit of that, such that when they left office, inflation was way down, unemployment was way down, the GDP had increased, things were looking up when Trump took office. All right? So he is telling the truth here in this fact sheet. Now, let's get straight to where this fact sheet talks about the things that he did specifically for African Americans. Okay? Here we go. Racial equality, equal opportunity, and diversity. From day one, the Biden-Harris administration committed to restoring the soul of our nation and made significant progress to redress systemic barriers, reduce burdens, and close unjust gaps. President Biden signed 2 historic executive orders to advance racial equity, equality, and support for underserved communities through the federal government. Well, we know since then, Trump has signed executive orders rescinding both of these executive orders. All right, just keep in mind the differences in these 2 administrations and what they have done for the African American community. To promote racial equality and promote equal opportunity, President Biden and Vice President Harris focused on increasing access to federal contracting dollars, capital, and lending programs for small disadvantaged businesses. All that has been, again, rescinded from Trump's executive orders. Reducing discrimination and approval bias in the housing market, very important. Tackling persistent poverty and building economic prosperity in rural communities. Reconnecting communities left behind and divided by historic redlining, disinvestment, and inadequate transportation infrastructure. He did every bit of this, okay, and more. Let's keep reading. Addressing health and healthcare disparities, including tackling the maternal health crisis and increasing access to treatment for rare and severe disease like sickle cell, rooting out educational inequities and preserving pathways to equal opportunity, ensuring all Americans can access the federal benefits they are entitled to, promoting fairness, transparency, accountability in the justice system, countering discrimination and hate-fueled violence, bolstering proactive enforcement that protects the civil rights of all Americans. Again, so much of what Trump is doing in office right now is to wipe away every bit of this. But these were the things that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been focused on. All right, let's get into some specifics. Black and Latino communities. Because of these efforts, the Biden-Harris administration made record progress. Here's how. They achieved the lowest Black unemployment rate on record and a historically low Latino unemployment rate. That's true. The Biden-Harris administration brought unemployment down for the Black community to the lowest it has ever been in American history. Trump, he claimed to have done that, and it was historically low during his administration, and that was because of the work of Barack Obama. When Trump took office, he inherited Obama's economy, and he had things going very well, despite him taking over the economy when it was almost tanked. I mean, Obama literally saved the country. So at any event, Biden has on record the lowest Black unemployment in American history. All right, also lifted 440,000 Black children, 360 Latino children out of poverty through increased SNAP benefits and narrowed racial disparities in child poverty to a historic low during the COVID-19 pandemic through the expanded child tax credit. And they are now, in Trump's, again, executive orders, is ripping all of this apart. All of this apart. SNAP benefits, every bit of it is being ripped apart. Between Trump's executive orders and this budget bill that they're trying to pass right now, everything that Biden and Harris did for the African American community is being dismantled right in front of our eyes. All right. He doubled black business ownership and increased Latino business ownership by 40% since before the pandemic. Because one of the biggest complaints that African Americans had was that we were not able to get small business administration loans. Well, Biden and Vice President Harris, they changed that. And blacks began to get record numbers of small business administration loans. They even changed the rules so that people who were previously convicted of felons could get small business administration loans. They tripled the number of SBA-backed loans to black-owned businesses and doubled the number of SBA-backed loans to Latino businesses, invested a record of more than $19 billion in historically black colleges and universities, as well as nearly $16 billion in Hispanic serving institutions. That is historic. Again, the most pro-black president since Lyndon Johnson. And these are the facts. Took on racial bias in home appraisals, closed the racial home value misvaluation gap by 40%, achieved the largest single-year increase in home ownership rates for Latinos, reduced mortgage insurance premiums for FHA loans, saving more than 130,000 black households and 185,000 Latino households an average of $900 per year. Isn't it wild and crazy that despite doing all this, a record number Latino men voted more for Trump than Biden? And an increasing number of black men voted more for Trump than Biden, despite them doing all these things for the African American and Latino communities? Why? Because of the disinformation that was being put out there. And of course, because Kamala is a female and she's black. That hurt her as well with those two groups. Distributed $2.2 billion in financial assistance to over 43,000 farmers, ranchers, forest land owners who previously experienced discrimination in loan programs. Increased black families' wealth even after adjusting for inflation 60% relative to pre-pandemic levels, the largest increase on record. These are facts. These are facts, and these facts are the reason we know that Biden was the most pro-black president since Lyndon Johnson. But I'm not finished. Let's also look at his cabinet and key appointments while he was in office. It's all historic. It's all historic. Let's go back to that screen. All right. So Biden's White House staff. So we see 100 of upper-level staff members. 61 were white. The next largest group is black. 15 black senior staff members in Biden's White House. So 61 is the highest, 15 blacks, the second highest, then Asian, then Hispanic, then unknown. So he put a whole lot of black folks in his cabinet. So he put a whole lot of black people in senior levels in the White House. All right, let's look now at his cabinet. He put more black people in his cabinet than any president in American history. He had 7 in key places. First, of course, first black female president in American history. And then there was General Lord Austin, who was over the Department of Defense, Marshall Fudge, who was over HUD, Michael Reagan, Fella Aggie, go Aggies, who was over the EPA, Shalonda Young over the all-important Office of Management and Budget, Linda Thompson, she was our UN ambassador. Then there was Cecilia Rouse, who was chair over the Council of Economic Advisors. These are key roles, key higher echelon roles in Biden's cabinet. 7 African-American people, the most of any president in American history. He also appointed more black federal judges than any president in American history. Let me say it again. He appointed more black federal judges than any president in American history. And that number specifically, 63 black federal judges, the most of a presidency of any length. And that is key, right? That is key because he was in office for 1 term. He did all this in 1 term. 63 black federal judges, and I am telling you how important those federal judges are, especially in a day like today. So here are all of the, or at least the last, 14 presidents, and we see Biden is at the top with 63 judges, federal judges that he appointed. The next down, Trump, 12, Barack Obama, 62, George W. Bush, 24, Bill Clinton, 62, George H.W. Bush, 13, Ronald Reagan, 7, Jimmy Carter, 37, Gerald Ford, 3, Richard Nixon, 6, Lyndon Johnson, 11, John F. Kennedy, 3, Dwight Eisenhower, 1, Harry Truman, 2. And do you also see the pattern that it is the Democratic presidents who appoint most of the black federal judges? These are the facts. And when we talk about appointing black federal judges or justices to the federal bench, I was elated when he nominated Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is on the court doing a tremendous job. She is fighting for the African-American community like Justice Thurgood Marshall did. People said about her appointment and about Kamala's vice president position, people said, these pro-black imposters said, it was all symbolic. One of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Ketanji Brown Jackson is not on that court as a symbol. She is on that court and she is making changes. She is forcing her Supreme Court colleagues to take our matters as African Americans seriously. She is there especially to blunt the positions that Clarence Thomas has taken over the decades. All right, so we just really, really celebrate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson being on the Supreme Court. And again, she's doing a brilliant job. I've read some of her dissenting opinions, and they have been totally, absolutely brilliant. I appreciate her being there. So when one considers the specifics of accomplishments that the Biden-Harris administration did on behalf of African-American people, the country at large, generally, but especially for African-Americans, again, the facts prove conclusively that he was the most pro-black president since Lyndon Johnson. No question. So, when we talk about the most pro-black presidents, here's the way they should be ranked. First, Lincoln, obviously. He was the president who saw slavery abolished. That was the biggest and most important change for the African American people. So Lincoln, number 1. Number 2, Lyndon Johnson. The legislation that he pressured Congress to enact brought teeth and reality to the 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments. Those amendments were very important, but they needed laws to give them enforcement powers. That's what Lyndon Johnson did with the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Fair Housing Act of 68, and a host of other legislation that was passed, that he saw to it that it was passed during his presidency. And then since then, the 60s, Joe Biden did the most. And Obama comes in fourth place. And that is not taking anything away from our first black president, because they really made it their priority, top priority, Congress, to make sure that Obama was hamstrung in what he could do. Yet, despite that, he got the Affordable Care Act done, which today ensures about 4 million African American people. Yes, that's right. That Affordable Care Act ensures about 4 million people have insurance and don't die on the streets because they can't get affordable health care. And there's so many other things that Obama did as well that you don't hear about. Why not? Because again, the disinformation. Do you hear people saying all the time, Obama hasn't done anything for black people? Obama hasn't done any. All they got to do is a simple Google search. And they'll see all that the man did for the African American community, despite unprecedented pushback from a white populace that despised having its first black president. Nevertheless, he got some things done for the African American community. So out of 47 presidents, I rank him number 4. That's pretty good. Right behind his vice president, right? Joe Biden. So, again, I've made my case with facts. Joe Biden was the most pro-black president since Lyndon Johnson. All right, I'm Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video, and remember, stay woke.